Nats trying to tack on to their 6-3 lead. Here's the set. The kick in the 1-0. Wood drives one, deep right field. It's hooking toward the corner. Will it stay fair? It hits the foul pole. It's a home run. James Wood bangs it off the foul pole for a 3-run shot. The Nationals blow it wide open as they lead it 9-3.
How about this guy, James Wood? He's ridiculous. Another unbelievable game last night from James Wood. 3 for 5, 4 RBIs, his 22nd homer of the year. He's now on pace for just over 45 homers. Not exactly what Cal Raleigh's on pace for. He's on pace for 67 in Seattle this year. But the Nats won. They beat San Diego last night 10-6. That, the call from Dave Jagler last night in San Diego, is Wood homered and drove in not only himself but 2 others to extend their lead to 9-3. They won 10-6. Good morning, everybody. Bobby Marks, who is an NBA draft guy for ESPN. We've had Bobby on the show before. He'll join us in about 30 minutes. We'll talk some NBA draft. It is tomorrow night and Thursday night, but we'll find out what he's thinking as far as the Wizards go. Mike Wilbon was on my podcast yesterday. I'll play some of that for you. We talked about the NBA Finals, of course, but we talked about some of the ways in which games were officiated during the postseason. And Mike had a big bombshell, I think, that he laid out there for me. So we'll play that probably at 11 o'clock. In terms of something that was a conscious decision when it came to this particular postseason and refereeing these NBA games. I'm going to start with this from Zane. Actually, I'm just going to tell you up front. Dozens and dozens of tweets yesterday and emails from all of you based on, I guess, what you guys thought was some sort of breaking news report, which it was not. I was just talking about what I've talked about since last October. But Zane wrote, Kevin, will they keep the black alternates? Zane, I have no idea if they'll keep the black alternates. From Will, Kevin, why wouldn't they use the logo? The logo was never considered to be a problem. Will, you're right. The logo was never an issue. No one ever, accused the logo of being insensitive or racist or anything else negative. But I don't think they're going back to the logo. But I don't know for sure. But that's my guess, is that they're not going to go back to the old logo. From Hal in Gaithersburg. Hal, it's been forever since I've heard from you. Hal used to be a guy that would write me all the time. Hal wrote, been a while, Kev. I'm not all back in, but a uniform change would help. From Jennifer, Kevin, more please on what they'll look like. Appreciate the conversation. Wow. You guys are amazing. I'm telling you right now that this is just me, okay? This doesn't mean that it's everybody's experience, in sports media in this town. I'm just speaking from my personal, experience and observation. Other than Mondays after a game, or maybe Fridays leading into the game, the draft, nothing generates more activity when it comes to calls, tweets, emails than name, uniform, branding talk. Nothing. That tells me all I need to know. And look, this is not a big reveal. It's been that way for a long, long time now. But just to be clear, I don't know, maybe the station sent something out that once again appeared as if I was breaking some news yesterday. I wasn't. I was just responding to people, Max, that had seen the spear, arrow, feather logo and were excited that maybe that was an indication that there might be something happening with the uniforms. And I just said what I said back in October, which, we're coming up now, we're talking about 8.5 months ago, when I said about the name. I said, look, there's no guarantee they're going to do anything with the name when the season ends, but I mentioned all the way back in October and repeated it yesterday. But I did learn from somebody definitely in the know that they will do something more likely than not with the uniforms. And it will probably start next year. And back in October, that means the upcoming season, 2025, with, an alternate, throwback to what they used to wear, or something resembling what they used to wear. And that may ultimately get, blended into something permanent in the year or two after. That's all. This is something that I think, I don't know if anybody was talking about it back then. I don't pay attention to it. I'm not an auditor of who gets things first or fifth. But back in October, that's what I had. I had information that they would very likely be doing something with the uniforms to make them look like the old uniforms, that the history, the tradition, the brand was still very important to ownership. By the way, the name was important to ownership in the moment as well. There were still many, many conversations about what to do with the name. What changed that was 12 wins in the regular season, 2 more in the postseason, which allowed for kind of a path of immediate, least resistance, which is why they came out and said, we're sticking with the name. It's something that the people out here in the building have really warmed up to. And that was always a possibility because, again, as it relates to the name, as much as I would, do cartwheels, that wouldn't look pretty, but would attempt to do cartwheels over them going, of course, back to the old name, which is not an option, but going back to Washington football team and allowing us to call them the Skins and bringing back the old uniforms with the old logo. I understand it's not easy, that there are so many different options, and that almost anything that they would land on wouldn't be overwhelmingly the right answer for everybody. It would probably be polarizing. Now, I have felt, and I still feel, that doing nothing is worse than doing something, but they've chosen the path of doing nothing as it relates to the name. And we'll see how it works out for them. Look, a Super Bowl trip, another 12 wins, and a deep playoff run, year after year, with Jaden Daniels being an MVP candidate and maybe an MVP, that's going to attract more people. It's going to build their business from where it was when they bought the team to where it is now to where it could be. Are they missing out on the ultimate home run in terms of immediacy of getting people back into the fold? I think so, but that's, again, it's not easy on the name front. I've always acknowledged that. As much as so many of you, and you push me and others like me on this all the time, it's a different era. We're living in a different world than we were 5 years ago. They should go back to the old name, and to hell with Roger Goodell and the league sponsors and the league network partners, etc. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Do I understand how popular it would be and that it is the home run answer for our fan base, past and present? Yes. But I just don't see that happening. I think that horse left the barn in July of 2020, and it ain't coming back. I still would prefer something else, but I understand how difficult the challenge of going to something else is. Look, if they had gone 6-11 this year, I think we would have been having serious conversations over the last few months about a name change. And I think the process would still be very much alive. But I also understand how challenging it was. Look, they looked into it. They understood that there was no easy answer. No easy answer. I get that. Now, on the uniform front, that's what I said back in October. It was told to me, the name, we'll see. Uniforms, really good chance that something will be done to make this team look like the way it used to look. And it would start in 2025, and they said at the time next year, with an alternate uniform, and that hopefully that would be the precursor of something more permanent the following year or 2 years after that. I mean, you've got certain things you got to do with the league before you change the uniform. Look, I get the This is what we talked about for years, during all of the name conversations when, a lot of people that didn't really feel, close to the team, weren't necessarily fans of the team, didn't really care what Native Americans themselves truly felt. And by the way, that's complex too. I mean, 500 plus Native American reservations, and they're very autonomous. You're going to find a few that actually didn't like the name. But for the most part, most of the polling that was always done indicated that at the very least, this was a very complicated issue and a very debatable issue within that community. And that likely a significant majority absolutely didn't feel as if the name was insensitive or racist. But beyond that, we talked about for many years that, emotional attachment to a brand is a real thing. You can ask any, consumer goods company that produces retail products for consumers, and they understand brand attachment. And this was an 85-year-old, brand with an incredible loyalty and brand attachment to it. Now, Snyder started to chase a lot of those people away. We saw the deterioration of the fan base, the erosion of the fan base because of how bad the team was, how embarrassingly behaved the team was. And, by all accounts, quantifiable, stuff from people, during those, 2018, 19, 2020, 21, 22, roughly 2/3 of the fan base was chased away. They don't have all 2/3 of it back. There's, we know that from ticket sales for this year. We know that from attendance, even last year, that wasn't any different than the year before. But they got a lot of people back. Clearly the tent got bigger. The umbrella, the fan base grew because of the performance of the team, because the team had a superstar quarterback, et cetera, because the team is just flat out more likable than they've ever been. But what was always at risk with any sort of significant brand change was what people in branding in consumer goods call emotional detachment. That was always the risk. And the way you get around that risk is to win big and win big right away. And they didn't do that after the name change in 2020. I guess they did go 7-9 and win the division. But they ended up being a terrible team for the next four seasons, right? 20, 21, 22, 23, before, being resurrected last year. And those people that were detached emotionally are, still detached emotionally. They don't feel it the same way. I don't feel it the same way. I've been very honest about that. I don't feel it the same way. And things like bringing back at least a team that looks like the team you used to watch on the field rather than the expansion team that landed here in February of 2022, it'll help. It will help. And I think that's what Hal in Gaithersburg, who obviously was one of those who was detached by the whole thing. Been a while. I'm not all back in, Kevin, but a uniform change would help. So these are the things they understand. Some of this will help. And of course, number one on the list, it's never changed, is winning and winning big. And they started to do that last year. So overall, uniform talk's not my favorite thing. I just shared with you 8.5 months ago what I had learned. I haven't learned anything new since 8.5 months ago. We were just sort of responding to some of the feedback from some of the, I guess, images or pictures or whatever was out on social media with the arrow and feather helmets. Those, by the way, just so you know, were throwback helmets a couple of times, throwback uniforms. But those helmets were not championship helmets. Most of you know that. They were the helmets of the 60s. Lombardi, when he got here in 69, made the change to the logo, which was not, put into actual circulation until 1970 after he had passed away. He coached here in 69. They won for the first time. 7-5-2 was the record 14-game schedule. 2 ties, no overtime back then. He had the thing going in the right direction, and they had those uniforms with that logo, the spear, the feather off that. And then they went to something that resembled the Green Bay Packers helmets. He wanted, just like the G, he wanted R. And so you had the yellow-ish helmets with the red R, which was the 1970 and 1971 logo and helmet. And then George Allen took over in 71 after Lombardi passed, and they had, a season of in 1970 that was just very, very sad for the franchise after losing Lombardi in the summer of 1970. But George Allen came in 71, and with the help of the Wetzel family, Blackie Wetzel, developed the logo that we, certainly attached to, great teams, championship teams, Super Bowl winning teams. And that lasted until 2020. But I don't know what specifically they're going to look like, guys. I have no idea. Jennifer, more on what they'll look like. I appreciate the conversation. No, I appreciate you reaching out, and I know how important this is to so many of you. I don't know what I just was told back in October they're going to look like the old uniforms. But I did get a sense back then, and I still have that sense, that the logo won't be a part of what they end up going to. I don't think it will be. I don't know what the logo will be. My guess would be the W stays on the helmets, but the uniform looks like, the uniforms that we remember being a part of the team for, 50 years or whatever it was. All right. So Bobby Marks is going to join us at 10:35. We're going to talk some NBA draft with him. I've seen some of these mock drafts. First of all, the NBA draft, it's not my favorite thing. It's certainly not the NFL draft. I mean, it is an even bigger crapshoot than the NFL draft is. It is, taking wild swings on 18-year-old gifted, talented basketball players that you have no idea. You got to have some idea if you're doing this for a living. But ultimately, we've seen this with the draft, that you just don't know what they're going to look like when they actually become physically mature young men. And it's a real, roll of the dice. Cooper Flagg certainly has the skill and the talent to become special. I actually really like Cooper Flagg's potential in the pros. I've liked Dylan Harper from the jump as a guy that clearly can score. Sometimes I think those positions, those guys that have really scored at the college level, they're easier to project. But after that, there are a couple of players I like, and we'll talk about more of those tomorrow on the show leading into the NBA draft. But man, the NBA draft, who the hell knows? You don't have to have the top pick. We understand that. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, not a top 10 pick. Jaylen Brown, last year's MVP, not the number one overall pick in the draft. We've had Jokic, a second rounder. Giannis outside the top 10. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard outside the top 10. Win, 5 out of the last 6 or 7 titles, and be MVPs. You just somehow have to get it right. And for the Wizards, Will Dawkins and company, they've got to land on somebody. Maybe they did it last year and we just don't know. Maybe Carrington, maybe George, maybe Sarr. Maybe one of those three is going to be a third team or second team All-NBA player in 3 or 4 years. I don't know that we saw that in their rookie seasons, but you don't really know even after one season. I actually thought all three showed signs that they will be contributing, players and NBA, players, not end of bench players, but participants on NBA rosters for years to come. But did they find, their answer? The guy that's going to be their SGA, that's going to be their Giannis, that's going to be their, Kawhi or their Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum? I don't know, but they've got to find that in this draft or next year's draft. I mean, if we're now, that would be 4 drafts starting with the Koulibaly draft once they, got down that path. And you've got, let's say 4, 7, 10, 9, 10 players over a 4-year period that have been picked, you got to know that you got one or two that can really lead a championship chase at that point. And it's hard to get it right. Look at all the great players that have gotten passed over that end up leading teams to the promised land. Not easy at all. But we'll see. They've got 6 and 18 tomorrow night. And then they also have second rounder early in the second round. Can't discount those, especially with some of the great players that have been taken in the second round. Jokic would be number one. All right. We've got some football to talk about. A breaking story related to NFL contract collusion. We'll get to that. And then Bobby Marks from ESPN will join us at 10:35. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So there's a story out there written by Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk, about something that he and Pablo Torre is with ESPN, correct? Yes.
I believe he was with ESPN.
Okay.
I think he does his podcast, Pablo Finds Out, which is a DraftKings sponsored production now.
So let me just give you the headline. They both believe that they have uncovered an effort by the NFL to collude against guaranteed salaries. Now, let me read from the story. Pablo Torre and Mike Florio teased that some major news was on its way last night. And the actual news itself came on Pablo Torre's podcast called Pablo Torre Finds Out. The show's host, Pablo Torre, explains that he and Florio had engaged in a friendly competition to uncover an arbitration ruling in the NFL Players Association's grievance against the league regarding collusion allegations, with Torre ultimately obtaining the document first. So there has been, much to my surprise, this is not something we've talked about, but there has been arbitration between the NFL Players Association and the NFL, with the accusation being that NFL owners colluded back in 2022 to quell or to stop fully guaranteed contracts. Well, this arbitration ruling apparently was uncovered by Torre and maybe even Mike Florio. And although, and this is what Pablo Torre states, the arbiter ruled in the NFL's favor, the document itself describing the arbitration remained very damning of the NFL. And here's what gets revealed by Florio and by Pablo Torre. The system arbitrator, the arbitrator in this case was somebody named Christopher Droney. He wrote this past January 2025 that, quote, there is little question that the NFL Management Council, with the blessing of the commissioner, encouraged the 32 NFL clubs to reduce guarantees in veterans' contracts at the March 2022 annual owners meeting, closed quote. Now, let me just repeat. The grievance itself failed. They ruled in favor of the NFL. But Droney, this guy, Christopher Droney, the arbitrator, essentially said that the union, the NFLPA, failed to prove by a, quote, clear preponderance, closed quote, of the evidence that the teams acted on the NFL Management Council's advice. So the NFL Management Council, for those of you who don't know, is this very powerful, essentially legal structure within the NFL. It's the group that negotiates everything on behalf of the commissioner and the 32 NFL teams. It is considered to be a very powerful part of the league, but it's separate. You know, the league itself is not an incorporation. It's not a corporation. It's not an LLC. It's just a group of 32 businesses that have come together as one for the purposes of providing NFL football and making money off of it. But anyway, the point being that they felt that while there was an attempt and direction given to not go down the path of guaranteed contracts, the NFLPA didn't prove that league owners actually took the advice from the management council. But there was another piece to this. The piece was about Russell Wilson. This was a conversation, by the way, in the wake of the Deshaun Watson 5-year, $230 million, pretty much fully guaranteed contract. So when they had these conversations at the 2022 owners meeting, it was in the wake of this horrible contract that Cleveland gave Deshaun Watson. Later on that summer, Russell Wilson was traded to Denver and then signed a new deal with Denver. Well, apparently the NFLPA did not like that Wilson didn't get a fully guaranteed deal. And NFLPA president J.C. Tretter at the time insulted Wilson behind the scenes, referring to him as a wuss over his failure to secure a fully guaranteed contract. Instead of being the guy that made guaranteed contracts the norm, Wilson's the guy that ruined it for everyone, Tretter said in a text message, according to the evidence uncovered by this arbitration. The theory goes that the NFLPA didn't want this arbitration, comment by Droney to come out because the text message comments about Russell Wilson from Tretter would be revealed as well. So there you go. Shocker. The NFL owners colluded on guaranteed contracts. But they didn't lose the arbitration hearing because the NFLPA apparently couldn't prove that they acted on the advice of their management council to stop guaranteed contracts. The irony is that really the first person to get a fully guaranteed contract was Kirk Cousins when he signed with the Minnesota Vikings in 2017, in the offseason of 2018. But man, that deal didn't come close to the Deshaun Watson deal. All right, we'll talk NBA draft with Bobby Marks from ESPN next.
All right, well, now that we're through the NBA Finals, some NBA trade news is hot off the presses. The Celtics are sending Drew Holiday back to the Portland Trailblazers in exchange for Anthony Simons and 2 second-round picks. And MRIs confirmed yesterday that Pacers guard Tyrese Halliburton has torn his right Achilles and will likely miss the majority, if not all, of the 2026 season. In a statement he released to social media last night, he said, quote, "I'd do it again," end quote. Cal Raleigh continues to extend his lead in the AL home run race after he launched his 32nd dinger of the season, his 6th home run in his last 6 games, and Aaron Judge trails with 28. The Bats get active last night to hoist themselves over the Padres. Mitchell Parker gets the win, and James Wood hits a three-run bomb to bust it wide open. The Nats win 10-6. They'll continue against the Padres tonight. First pitch at 9:40, and Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 9:10. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the streams and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Tomorrow night, the NBA draft. Not exactly the NFL draft, especially for cities like ours, but the Wizards have 2 first-rounders. They've got a second-rounder. They're in the midst of this, this process of acquiring lots of picks and taking swings. The draft lottery didn't work out great for them, but they will pick 6th and 18th in the first round of the NBA draft. Joining me right now, Bobby Marks, an NBA front office insider, draft expert. He was the general manager, assistant GM in the NBA with Brooklyn for many years. We've had Bobby on the show and love his insight, and he does a really good job, especially this time of year, in previewing not just the draft opportunities, but really the overall franchise situation for all 32 teams, and he did that yesterday as it related to the Wizards. Before we get to the Wizards in the NBA draft, because we're just a day removed from an actual Game 7 in the NBA Finals, what did you think of the series, this final series between OKC and Indiana, and the postseason overall, the last 2 months of some pretty compelling games and series? What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, certainly the finals on probably most years, it was, the ultimate roller coaster, right? I mean, we went from Oklahoma City losing at the end of game 1 by blowing a lead to a game 7 where, Tyrese Halliburton, tears his Achilles and Oklahoma City prevails. I think we probably learned a lot about Oklahoma City as far as the growth of this team from that Denver series to now, a team that's probably only going to get better moving forward here. But I do think we're kind of living in a day and age of parity in the league where there's certainly now when you have, the Tatum injury and Lillard and Halliburton, 3 guys on Achilles, 3 of the top 5 teams in the East. That changes the dynamics a lot, certainly in the Eastern Conference, and then what you see out West, what's going on right now. So you probably have, 25, 26 teams that I think they can, get into, our playoff teams. And I think a lot of that probably stems from the injuries and certainly how the rules are in place right now.
Yes. So if you had to guess on whether or not Oklahoma City's at the beginning of something, we don't have to call it a dynasty, but we can just say, what we said about Denver 2 years ago, that this isn't going to be the first. There are going to be more to come for Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets. Do you think that we're at the beginning of, them being a significant part of the NBA Finals in most years over the next 5 to, plus years?
They have the resources, not just what's on their roster, but what potentially could be coming with their draft picks to be, a face in June for a long time here. Certainly for next year. I mean, you look at what they have. They've got all 15. They've got to make some decisions with probably the back end of the roster because they have 15 players under contract, and they have 2 picks, 15 and 24 in the first round. And then they have Nikola Topic, who probably not many people don't know. They drafted him in the lottery last year as a point guard, and he was injured this whole year, and he'll be back. And then they have the potential of having 4 first-round picks next year. So I think yes, I think they have the resources to sustain this. I think it will be interesting when Shea and Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren, 3 players that are extension eligible. Is there a ripple effect a few years from now as far as, what happens with maybe some of the back end of the roster, the Lou Dortz and the Isaiah Hartenstein. But yeah, I mean, I think if out of any of the 30 teams, they're the one team that they certainly have the sustainability.
If they didn't do it, what would be the reason other than injuries?
I mean, it's always you sometimes you want to say that the dynamics of the locker room, but man, you watch these guys. I mean, they generally love each other. That's the beauty. I think they're just so young, and they probably haven't been through some, outside of playing, the real life things. And now some of them are going to get paid pretty handsomely here. So yeah, I mean, just from the sports, whether it be not just basketball, sometimes there's a rift, whether money comes into play. Maybe there's a player that sees his role expanded, should be expanded more. That Casey Wallace, for example, maybe thinks he's a starter. And he's not happy with his role. Those are usually sometimes the dynamics as far as what kind of splits teams up.
I thought, and I'm just curious as to what your reaction to this. I thought I was watching over the last 2 months one of the best defensive teams that I've ever watched this time of year. And I think there's a lot of numbers and advanced numbers that would prove that out.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was not, overwhelmed by this team offensively. Forget the shooting itself, which was streaky.
Yep.
They were a stagnant offensive team a lot of the time, almost looked borderline at times disorganized. I mean, they couldn't handle full court pressure, getting the ball in bounds in multiple games. So I look at that. I mean, I loved watching this team defensively, Bobby, but I look at that and then I look at the competitive landscape in the West. And I guess I wouldn't be surprised if they don't end up going on a massive championship run.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, listen, this is not your 93 Bulls. And it's probably, I don't even know if it's the 2015 version of Golden State. I would say, yes, from an offensively standpoint, we saw it. I mean, we saw it in the games they lost, and I think we started to see it in Game 7 when things got tight, right? They went ISO ball, it stagnated. They got bailed out a little bit on maybe some calls, and I think Dort hit the three on the top of the key. If there was another 5 minutes, they would have probably been in trouble. But the beauty of it is defensively, because when they defend and they turn the team over, it comes in waves. A tied game could be a 10-point lead all of a sudden here, and that's why I said at one point of Game 7, I said, listen, I think Indiana was -4 in turnover margin. They were down 3. I was like, if you just keep it at this, you've got a chance. But when you start turning the ball over, that just leads into what Oklahoma City is really good at.
Yeah, and it was, these were forced turnovers the majority of the time. It was impressive to watch, not just in this series, throughout. All right, let's talk draft. We're talking to Bobby Marks at Bobby Marks 42 on X. He was in the front office in the NBA with Brooklyn for many, many years and has been doing this at ESPN now for many, many years. Just big picture on the NBA draft.
Yeah.
Like you study it every year, but I kind of look at it as like such a crapshoot, 18-year-old, such a projection, which is why Jokic, a second rounder, was an MVP. Giannis outside the top 10, SGA outside the top 10, Kawhi outside the top 10. You're never sure where that transcendent superstar player will get picked. How do you kind of just describe overall the process of the NBA draft and the sort of roll of the dice nature to it?
Yeah, I mean, there's no exact science as far as how the draft goes, and I think if you talk to a lot of front offices, it's probably one of the more challenging ways as far as assembling a roster. A little bit of it, certainly comes with luck. A little bit of certainly it goes beyond the basketball court, where the personality of that player you're drafting and how he fits into your locker room and how coachable he is, and a lot of the different elements to it. I do think when you nail, as I think, if you nail the draft and you get these players on these 4-year contracts that eventually turn into another 4 or 5-year contract, that can set you up for a long, long time. And I think, listen, this year, I think there's probably, certainly where Washington is at 6, and then they're, the pick at 18, we'll start with the pick at 6. There's probably 3 tiers. There's the Cooper Flag tier. There's the Dylan Harper tier at tier 2. And then there's a group of 5 or 6 players in that tier 3 where the Wizards are going to be picking at, whether it be Ace Bailey or Jeremiah Fears or Kaman Malilock or Con Knipple, VJ Edgecombe, there's a Trey Johnson. There's a lot of good players in that mix here. And it's you got to trust your personnel guys. I always say that, like, they're the guys, they're the boots on the ground. They're the ones out there going to gyms, watching guys in practice, going, on a Tuesday night and at Cameron Indoor Stadium, seeing a player against Citadel, for example. That's where if you have great personnel guys, then I think it gives you an advantage when you go through this process.
So let's start with Flag. Do you think he is, what we thought Zion Williamson would be, what we think, and even to this day, what Victor Wembanyama will be? Where is he on the scale of like transcendent, franchise-changing number one overall picks?
I saw Cooper when he was 16 down in Southwest Florida, and I thought he could play in the NBA then. He is young. The beauty of him, usually when we're looking at players who are drafted, in the top 3 or number 1, it's always the offense that stands out, which certainly that's a strong trait for him. His best trait is the ability to defend, his length. He can lock you down. He's switchable. I think he can guard multiple positions here. You can put him in a game right now, and you don't have to rely on him to score. That's why going to Dallas is such a good place as far as from a fit standpoint here. So, yeah, I do think, you never know what will happen 3 or 4 years from now, but at least from what we can evaluate, I think he has the potential to be pretty special.
Fans do this. I don't know if you do this or not, but I think for people who, don't pay attention closely to it, they always, say, well, who's his comp? So who is his comp, either current or historically? Yeah.
I don't, we were talking last night. Jonathan Gavoni does a great job, our draft expert. We were talking about it. And I think it ranges, from a defensive standpoint, certainly the length of Aaron Gordon. I think Kawhi, certainly the measurables are right up there with Kawhi Leonard as far as from if you're wingspan. Just taking, the wingspan, everything else that comes with it. I think, I thought, and I said this to a scout when I saw him a few years ago, he reminded me, and this is going way back, it reminded me a lot of Kevin Garnett when Kevin was coming out of high school in Chicago, just based on, and Kevin was a little bit longer, but just as the ability to kind of, from the defensive standpoint.
Wow. I mean, Garnett was taller too.
Yeah, he was, 7 foot or so,
right.
He was taller, but just from like the intangibles, he just has a really, his basketball IQ is off the charts. He has the will. He loves basketball. He has the will to win. Most of these guys here. But I do think he has a chance to be pretty special.
Yeah, and the Wizards ended up with the 6th pick in this draft lottery with maybe a chance to change their franchise around for the first time in 50 years. So you mentioned Harper is kind of in that next category on his own. Who do you see Harper in terms of comp?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and he's probably going to a situation where what his strength is probably what they don't need because Dylan, I think, is better. Yeah, I mean, Dylan is better with the ball in his hand. He struggled a little bit from the perimeter. Certainly a crappy scorer, but you've got De'Aaron Fox and you got Stephon Castle there already here. So you're basically going best available, and then you figure the fit from there and everything like that. But he's a big guard, certainly the pedigree with his dad playing in the NBA for a long time. It's a very interesting story. His mom has been his coach, and she's basically has been guiding him the last, since he's been a little boy.
Interesting. So in that next group where the Wizards will obviously select, and you said there are several players in that group, and we've seen Ace Bailey mocked to Washington over and over again. Give me sort of the player that you think would be the best fit for here.
I think Ace Bailey would be. I really do. And listen, I get it. Like there's a lot out there right now, but the workouts and him not going places and him blowing off workouts. And I think there's 2 ways to separate that. I think there's the blowing off a workout or not showing up off a workout. I do think that shows a level of irresponsibility. Okay. But let's remove that. There's been plenty of players in the NBA, in the NFL, who have manipulated the draft process and got to a place where they want to go to. And he's not the first guy to do it. And there's a difference of $15 million in salary by going from 3 to 6. And if he's willing to do that, then we can't fault him there. But I just look at him as a position of need. He is long. He is athletic. He is, 6'8". I know he measured at, a little bit smaller than what, he was listed at Rutgers. His mid-range game is probably as good as anybody in this draft class. I think there's a little bit of an erraticness with him. His personality is outgoing, as we've seen, of course. But I do think if he's there I would be surprised if he gets past them at 6.
When you said about, watching Cooper Flagg in November against Stetson, or I forget, Wofford, whatever you said. I mean, I was in College Park. Rutgers came in to play Maryland, and Derek Queen dominated Ace Bailey, and he took himself out of the game, tapped out completely, and said he was sick. And that's one of those things where, if you're a fan of college basketball and the NBA, and I'm a big fan of Maryland and the Wizards, I'm like, I don't want him if he were to fall to wherever we picked.
And that's what scouts are doing. You're basically it's not just he went for 39 against Indiana, right?
Right.
It's like you're looking at every little thing, whether it be off the court. I always look at when a player gets taken out of game, what to how does he walk off the court, right? Does he interact with the coach? So I do think there's a lot of different things there, as far as just not the basketball skill, as far as the intangibles, as far as how would he be if he's not playing, if he's only playing 10 minutes a game here. So there's a lot that certainly comes into that.
No, to your point. I mean, I saw him one night at Northwestern where he went for 37. I'm like, who's this guy? And it's really hard, right, Bobby? Because they're 18 years old. We don't know how they will physically and mentally grow up, because they're not, they're a long way from being men. And that makes it hard. What do you think of Derek Queen, and why has he in mock slid as far as like 15?
Yeah, I mean, I like, certainly, the pedigree of playing at Mount Verde with the 3 other players that will likely go in the first round with Asa, Cooper, and Liam. I call him kind of the babyface assassin. He will not do well in individual workouts. Nope. I'm telling you, like and he probably will not do. He probably did not do well if you asked him to shoot, 50 top of the key threes and stuff like that. So for me, I think it's as we said, it's kind of like going back to like, watching him play 5-on-5. Like we tend to kind of over evaluate this draft process here because of him going to 10 teams in 3 weeks, and it's the body breaks down and all these things, and his athletic measurables aren't great. And I'm sure you could probably say the same thing with Nikola Jokic, a long time ago here. But I do think his weight is really good. I think he's at 245 right now. I know it was a little bit higher at Maryland. He's a little bit undersized, but I think he's got such soft hands. I think he's extremely, extremely skilled. I think there's a toughness about him. He might look like the youngest player, but I do think there is a toughness about him.
2 more, and I appreciate the time.
Sure.
Walter Clayton Jr., who was phenomenal during the NCAA tournament. He's also played in college for 4 years, and for whatever reason, those guys get knocked down a little bit. I was surprised to see when the mocks started to come out, him at the end of the first round. What do you think he is at the next level?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think what will probably get pegged a little bit is his size. He is undersized. But when you look at what he did at Florida, and I think what he did at Iona, he's a big-time shot maker when the game matters. And I think you have to take that into consideration. He is a bit erratic. He is probably certainly with the ball, trying to make the perfect pass, the home run pass here. But he is an ultra competitive kid. I expect him to go in the first round. I think he would be he's experienced, having been at, the Florida the last couple of years, and then certainly at Iona.
All right. Last one. Give me the guy that you're in love with that you don't see getting mocked as high as you think he should be mocked. And then the reverse of that. Who do you think right now is being over mocked? Give me those 2 names.
Yeah. I mean, I think the guy that I would, if I was still in the front office and I was picking in the late lottery, I would seriously consider is a player named Nick Clifford, who is at Colorado State, 6'6" wing. He averaged close to 10 rebounds this year. 4.5 assists. He started at Colorado and then transferred to State. probably the knock on him is that he's 24. I mean,
Yeah.
so I really like him. He declared last year, for the draft and everything like that. As far as a guy that maybe might be too high, I don't know. It's so fluid and everything like that. As far as where, guys, we might see a little bit high. Thomas Sorber, who's, you guys have seen him down in Georgetown. I think he's projected 15, 16, somewhere around there. He's coming off the injury that cost him the most of the tail end of the regular season here. I don't think he'll be ready for summer league here. So you're basically, you're relying on, as I said, basically 3 or 4 months of what he did at Georgetown. But I think he's got a first round grade. It's just a matter of kind of where he goes.
Yeah, the Nick Clifford, he played very well against Maryland in the tournament game that Derek Queen made the game winner in. But he reminds me of that kid, Chris Duarte, who also had a really good tournament for Oregon and was much older a few years ago. But, I mean, if he can play, he can play. I don't get the age thing usually. Bobby, thanks so much. Really appreciate the insight.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Bobby Marks, everybody. Yeah, that guy, Nick Clifford, that was the game Queen hit the game winner to get Maryland to the Sweet 16. He was awesome in that game. And it was so obvious watching the game because it's like they're playing Colorado State and you don't think they have any pros. And it's like, wait a minute, they got a pro on their team. This guy, Nick Clifford, who was wearing, I think, number 10. It's like whoever number 10 is, that guy is an NBA player. He certainly looks like it. And he is now mocked in the first round. Interesting stuff. It's going to take a few years to figure out who got it right and who got it wrong. I'll tell you what, though, he is a clear, big-time Cooper Flag fan. And, some of those comps are pretty damn good comps. All right, Mike Wilbon joined me on my podcast yesterday. You'll hear some of that next. Coming up a little bit later on in the hour, somebody out there during, list season, ranking season, trade talk season suggested a major defensive end pass rusher to Washington and a Washington receiver moving out of town. We'll talk about that in about 30 minutes. But Mike Wilbon joined me on my podcast following the NBA Finals Game 7 on Sunday night, which drew a pretty sizable audience, the biggest audience for an NBA game since, I think, 2019, I think it was, maybe 2021. But 16.8 million, I think, which is, a good audience for an NBA Finals game. If it had been more competitive, you probably would have seen that number higher. But anyway, I digress. Wilbon came on with me yesterday, and you should listen to this because he talked about something that nobody's talked about as it relates to how the NBA officiated and consciously made an effort to change the way they officiated this particular postseason. But there was a lot of conversation about Game 7, and it started with me asking him if he thought Tyrese Halliburton staying in the game would have meant Indiana would have won the game.
Man, Kevin, I don't think so, and that's a perfectly legit question, and that's what we're all wondering, given the way it played out. I got to tell you, I went into this as neutral as you can be. And in fact, most of these playoffs. I mean, I still have my favorite players and coaches, but I went into this final round because I picked Oklahoma City on the first day of the season to win the championship.
Really?
And, the first day, coming into the season, October 20, whatever, I had OKC winning. But then I had my doubts along the way. I had my doubts in that series with Denver, and that did go 7 games. And I just thought, okay, Minnesota should be a bigger threat than they were. But, the West is so loaded, as you know. But by the time we got to this, I covered Rick Carlisle. I covered Rick Carlisle as a player at the University of Virginia.
Yeah, I remember.
With Ralph Sampson and Cook playing for Terry Holland. And I've known Rick, 45 years. And just one of the two guys I'm going to toot my horn about, Kevin, about going to their lockers all the time and talking to them all the time were Rick Carlisle and Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson, who was a sophomore and not even starting at St. John's, and Rick, who was a transfer from Maine at Virginia. And those guys just had it. You could know that when they were 19.
Yeah.
And so I do have I have a straight up bias for Rick Carlisle, who I think is maybe the most underrated coach in the last 15 years in the NBA. So I went into this totally neutral. Because SGA may be my favorite player now. And I didn't think they could win last night. I just thought Game 7 in that environment was too much. But maybe they could have. The way Halliburton started off, 4 shots for 9 points, 3 threes.
Yeah.
And the inspiration he provided. See, people want to fall back. There's 2 generations of people now who can't talk about sports without numbers and analytics. You don't need analytics. Analytics can't tell you whether a guy inspires his team in the locker room an hour before a game. Can't tell you that.
Right.
And so he did that. They were rallying around him. It was something to see. I'm gonna be honest with you. I just didn't care about the game after he got hurt.
Really?
I just didn't. I lost it. I lost my zest for the game because what was going on those first 6 minutes, 7 minutes, that was fictional. It was so great.
Yeah.
That was stuff you write in your head, it's not going to actually happen. It was that good. So, I just didn't love the game after that. And I knew Oklahoma City was going to win. If they'd won with him in there, and look, Oklahoma City deal with championship teams too. They took advantage of a weakened opponent. That's what you do. I don't have anything but praise, but I have admiration for Indy. I have actual admiration for what those guys did in this series and last night.
By the way, just off of your discussion briefly about Rick Carlisle, I think you'll know this, but for everybody listening, do you know what Rick Carlisle can claim at Virginia that Ralph Sampson can't? Actually, that's not true. I'm sorry. Ralph Sampson made the Final Four.
Ralph got to a Final Four,
and lost to North Carolina. But remember, Ralph, we expected Virginia to get back to the Final Four and win a title with Ralph.
Holden Polynice did that. Yeah, Holden Polynice did that
with Rick Carlisle the year after Ralph.
Was Rick still on that team? Yeah. After Ralph left. It was such a and so he did that at Virginia when they weren't supposed to at all, that second team.
Right.
And then he was part of the 1986 Celtics team with Bird, McHale, and Parrish. That if you're going to throw in a real discussion about the greatest teams of all time, that team goes in there. And Rick was on that team, making him one of 14 people who won both the championship as a player and as a head coach.
The Virginia team with Ralph and Rick Carlisle was in the starting lineup in Ralph's senior year. They got beat by the NC State team, by the Valvano team in the Elite Eight.
That's right.
And that was it for Ralph. And it was shocking. And then the next year, they weren't even supposed to be that good. And Terry Holland's team with Polynice, Carlisle, and I think Othell Wilson was on that team too, went to the Final Four.
Othell Wilson missed a
against
floater in the lane that would have won the game and put them in the final against Georgetown.
Against Georgetown.
Yeah.
Exactly. They lost the semifinal game in overtime against that Elijah One team lost to Georgetown in the final. Yeah. Although I don't think Drexler was on that team. I think Drexler had gone.
Drexler was gone, but maybe Mishaw was gone and Rob. So there was still some leftover guys. Young was still on that team, but they were still a powerhouse, obviously, with Elijah One and his powers.
Carlisle was an excellent college point guard. Excellent. College
guard. He was. And his understanding of the game.
Yeah.
Which started, obviously way back then. He incorporates everything he knows and can use now as a head coach.
So I thought you picked him from the beginning of the season. I thought it was going to be before the playoffs started. I thought it was going to be one of those where, it's too soon. They've got to win a couple series, then get to the finals and lose. But after I saw them destroy Memphis, and then early in the Denver series, I'm like, this team's going to win it all. I think it's the best defensive team we've seen in the NBA playoffs in a long, long time.
Agreed.
Just tell me overall what made you fall in love with Oklahoma City, and then how you describe their run to a title, to somebody that didn't watch it.
Well, it's the way they play, they collectively, and I voted Jalen Williams either second or third team All NBA this year. And people might say, well, it was a year too early. Maybe I'll take it. The way it played out in the playoffs. I remember I did that with Kawhi Leonard in his maybe third season. People say, why did you do that? Those guys. You don't win 60 whatever games. 68? What they win?
68. Yeah.
You don't win 68 games with one dude. I mean, Jordan didn't win 68. Just him. Pippen by then was great. And so I saw it's the way they play. Lou Dort is the best. He was my defensive player of the year. If we start talking about voting, Lou Dort was my defensive player of the year. And J-Dub was on my all-defensive team. You got two guys on your all-defensive team. They're going to be great. And you got the MVP.
Yeah.
And so Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who I fell in love with 2 years ago, really. But last year, to me, he's the perfect superstar. Listen to him.
Love him.
People should listen to what he says. There's not one egotistical moment in that kid's resume. There's not one. He's not bothered with that. By the way, Canada is going to win the gold medal in the Olympics.
Really?
Just telling people that now.
There were four of them in these finals.
Yeah.
He really.
It's the way they play and the way he is as a superstar.
I told Scott the night he had him on in the playoffs for the first time, and I'm like, that guy is so mature, so thoughtful. Yeah. Actually, I think their whole team, no matter how young they are. I mean, Jalen Williams is so impressive. That whole team is very impressive.
Dort, very impressive. You can go down the roster and get to Jason Wallace and Wiggins. You can go down the roster, but certainly Holmgren when you listen to him. So that's infectious. That's their. By the way,
Sam
that's
Presti.
how you build a championship team.
Yeah,
Sam Presti. You don't have to finish first, second, or third in the lottery. They got Holmgren who was second or third. I guess he was second. So that talent doesn't hurt you, but you can do this. You can build a great team and not finish first, second, or third. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and J-Dub was pretty high too, but you have to craft a team, and intelligence. Talent is a big part of it, but so is intelligence, unselfishness, lack of ego. They got that in spades, man. And I just love that about them last year. When a couple of times on the road, I was in their locker room and I was like, yeah, these dudes, they got it.
So defensively, I mean, where would you're a historian when it comes to this. I've talked about, the Pistons teams, the Bulls teams of the 90s. I don't think I've seen a team that, 1 through 8 or 9 that essentially could guard 1 through 5. They were all incredible on-ball defenders, team defenders. I just thought defensively they were as good as any team I can remember. Where would you put them?
They're different than San Antonio because San Antonio had Duncan. And I'm hesitant to compare many teams defensively to them with the anchor like him.
Yeah.
But they are, to me, similar to the Bulls teams with Ron Harper because you had 4 great defenders. You had Jordan, Pippen, Rodman, Harper.
Yep.
You had 4 great defenders. And, 3 of them could have been Defensive Player of the Year back then. I mean, Rodman was, Jordan was, Pippen was on first team 10 times. So I compare it to them because they got 4 great defenders. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is the 4th best defender. And he's a great defender.
Yeah.
Did he lead the league in steals? So, I mean, and there's some Utah teams that were great too because Stockton and Malone were great defenders and so was Brian Russell. I don't know that they had a 4th, but, they go up there in that group. And obviously, Shaq and Kobe had that with them, and they had Ron Harper. So, there've been some great defensive teams all along. But I put OKC right with that group of teams. San Antonio, I mentioned, people forget Ginobili was a great defender. When they had Ori, great defender, even though he was coming off the bench. There were times before that with Sean Elliott, great defender. So, you've had some teams with multiple great defenders. They got a whole team. They got a whole team full. And they got a 7-footer. They got 2 7-footers.
Yeah. What did you...
And that's what those teams didn't have.
What did you think? Because I mean, Oklahoma City's defense was just fun to watch. I mean, the Rockets Warrior series was so intense defensively. The Pacers Knicks series was. I mean, the Pacers were better defensively. But did you sense or have you sensed in recent years the games become, we went from those Pistons, Nets, Spurs, 88, 85, 79, 78, to getting rid of the hand check, more of a free-flowing game, back to a game that is very physical, and it gets officiated without, putting the clamps on the physicality. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not just impression, Kevin. I didn't know this. I think I probably shouldn't. I'd like to give him credit on the air since our listeners will know who he is. So during the playoffs, I'm in Madison Square Garden, maybe for the second round, probably for Celtics, Knicks, and I'll just say a little birdie who stands about 7 feet and is important to Washington D.C. basketball people said to me, "How do you like going back to this style of officiating and calling the game and the physicality?" And I said, "Yes, this is great. I'm stunned at it." And he goes, "Why are you stunned at it?" And I said, "Because we haven't seen it." And he said, "You don't know that this was ordered by the league." I was like, "Get out of here." He said, No. This is spoken. This is talked about. This is planned. This is not an accident." And sure enough, I did find out the league wanted this, and this was talked about. I don't know to what degree. I don't know what was said specifically, but once, that is the case. So this was not by accident that happened. And so let me give the league some credit. for realizing you can have both. You can have enough free-flowing basketball with a combination of physicality to make it a great product, and that's what it was. That's what these players.
Why do you? That's fascinating. I certainly, as a basketball fan, noticed what teams were able to get away with. I mean, it was. I mean, this series in particular, the championship series, both teams. I mean, first of all, when have we ever seen two teams until the last two games full court press each other? You know, like it was a high school or a college game. So we saw that, and we saw them get away with it, get away with a lot of, physical, body, hands. Why do you think the league wanted it to be that way?
Well, because I don't know who was in the room, but there are people who I'm sure when you have these discussions say, wait a minute, we have to allow more. We can't just turn this game over to offense, which the NFL better be careful about, because that's what they've done. And you can't just turn it. We don't want to take that element out of the game. And so in the first round, maybe it's just, let's see. I don't know. I don't know the particulars of the conversation. But I do know, and had it confirmed, that is what happened.
Wow.
And so whatever the instincts were, whoever was in the room, whatever group of former players, officials, zebras, whatever group of people were in that discussion, good for them. They got it right. I got nothing but praise for that.
I enjoyed it, and you noticed it right from the beginning, because that Rockets-Warriors series in particular was great. And it got very chippy, with some of the players, Dylan Brooks, et cetera, involved in it. All right, so let's talk about... The
product, to me, was as good as it could get without everybody ripping up an Achilles. The product was as good as it could get.
I thought it was 2 months of incredible basketball. Now, with that said, I think these finals, while incredibly intense, at times well played, there was nothing memorable about the games themselves. Game one was a stunner, the comeback.
Game one was memorable.
Game one was nuts. But after that, we didn't have one game, I don't think, decided by, less than double digits. Or maybe...
ball in the air was, and I think there's a lot of series like that when I look back. I think most series maybe have one game, maybe a second. I mean, you can get spoiled. We got spoiled for, how many finals? 6 and 6. We got spoiled by watching Michael and Kobe and and LeBron and Steph, you and then they had 4 or 5 against each other. You get spoiled by that. You don't have necessarily that kind of shot maker in this series. Although again, Shea is MVP, and it's his first one. His first one. He may be back. And then while I hate the dynasty talk, I don't want to hear it. It makes me angry. After one, there's no dynasty of one. People need to shut up. They could get back, because now the West is going to be a monster, but it's going to take a year, because you don't have Kyrie with Dallas, and it's going to take Cooper Flag and that group a year, and then they're going to be a monster if they're together and healthy. Anthony Davis, Kyrie, and a young Cooper Flag, a guy who can do stuff because he's a young stud, and PJ Washington and Klay Thompson, old crafty guy who can just make a basket whenever you need one. Dallas is going to be a monster. So people can scream at Nico Harris all they want. And then you got the Lakers, who I still think need a year if they can get there. If they can get there. Houston's going to get there, but I think they need a year. Who else do I have in that mix?
Denver, if they can add to their
I don't know. Denver's got they got some roster augmentation.
Yeah.
Like now.
Yeah.
So I don't know. They better do this before Joker just says, I'm tired, I'm leaving, like pulls a Bjorn Borg and leaves at the height of his powers. I don't want to see that, because I think he's the best player in the world. So, but there's the West is, and San Antonio, they're coming. They're coming. Suppose they trade. Why wouldn't you pick up the phone and say to Milwaukee, look, I know he hasn't requested a trade. You can have the 2 and the 14 and Sochan, and you give us Giannis. and you get Giannis and Wembanyama and the kid from UConn.
Yeah, and a high pick. No. But real quickly on before, because I did want to ask you about the Durant trade and what you think it does for Houston.
Sure.
We didn't mention, by the way, I think they've got to move on from James Harden. I actually think Kawhi looked like Kawhi in the postseason, but I'll move away from them.
Real quickly, I think James Harden's better older because he can't do all the stuff that requires him to have the ball 22 seconds. I think Harden's better as a playmaker. I think he's better now.
Yeah, but you can't play that. You can't play that much ISO ball and win 4 out of 7 for 4 series.
But he doesn't play as much ISO ball. He doesn't play as much ISO.
Yeah, he did in that series against the Nuggets. Too much. Yeah. I think it's too much for Brunson, to be honest with you, to win 4 out of 7.
I do too. He's got it. But the coaching may change that. We don't know how that's going to play out.
So on SGA, okay, so he wins it, and I love him too, but I don't consider him to be the best player in the league. Do you?
I consider the best player in the league to be Joker, and then but my top 5. I mean, if now that people can come back whole from Achilles tears, it was Tatum. So my 5 were pretty rock solid 5, and my 5 were Joker, Giannis, SGA, Tatum, and
Edwards
and Anthony Edwards. Those are my 5.
Yeah, because
and by the way, it's going to change if Wembanyama it comes back and has the arc that we expect, and Wembanyama is going to replace somebody in that.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I mean, the guy that I had no idea about, did not think was going to be as good as he is, and I think he's coming to in an SGA kind of way is Cade Cunningham. But we don't have to talk about down the road.
Yes, Cade Cunningham agreed with you. And by the way, I'm a Castle guy. That's why I think San Antonio is going to blitz people soon. Oklahoma City better get a second one quickly.
I would still take Joker, and I actually think what was the most impressive thing in this postseason, other than Indiana and the way they never were out of any game, I mean, that was fun to watch, is the fact that Denver, with Gordon hurt late, Porter Jr. hurt the entire series and no depth, literally were about 4 or 5 minutes away from taking a 3-1 series lead in Game 4 and almost won Game 5 against Oklahoma City, which tells you told me Joker's the best player. The fact that they almost won that series with nothing in terms of a bench and injured starters tells you how great he is. But we're arguing. We're arguing Olajuwon versus Jordan, and I know SGA is not Jordan. But we're arguing the styles of play. Yeah. Where Olajuwon was a dominant force, and then Jordan was his own dominant force, just different ways. SGA controls the game. He controls it. And so he can do stuff. He can get you 10 assists like he did last night with 12. He can get you 40. He's a really good defender. He's not Jordan level defense, but he's a top 15 defender in the league. Yeah.
And so, and Joker doesn't have that. Joker is not the defender.
No, he isn't.
But he's great. I got Joker as the best player in the league. And so I just want to see Denver be a factor. And I love Adelman. I love this kid.
They're gonna keep him,
what
right?
He did with them they ought to keep him. And I liked what he did in real time. And I got a chance to be around Denver some in the Clipper Denver series. I was at that series, and I want to see what they gotta make. When they lost, Bruce Brown, they got Christian Brown, I know, but you didn't need a replacement. You needed an addition. And so we'll see what they do. Look, this league's going to be shaken up because all these teams are going to look and say, okay, if we're going to keep up with OKC, we got to do this. And the East people are going to say it's wide open until Indiana's whole again. We got to do this, and that starts with the Knickerbockers. The Knicks better while Boston and Indy are wounded. The Knicks better get there before Detroit. I'm not sure they can, but they better act like they can.
I don't think I've ever asked you this. How would the Rockets of 94 and 95 without Jordan if let's just say Jordan doesn't go off to do the baseball thing or whatever the reasons, what would have happened in a Houston Chicago NBA Finals back-to-back years in 94 and 95? Because Elijah won. He was
so great.
He was so great.
He was so great, and he was the one thing they hadn't beaten.
Right.
Like they hadn't beaten the Lakers. It was a young Vlade.
It was Vlade,
second year maybe.
Right.
Vlade was young. Portland didn't have. They had. I can't think of
the guy that played for the Bullets briefly. I'm forgetting.
It
his
name.
It
was a Chicago kid too. I think
he passed away too.
I think so. But they didn't have it. Nobody. Seattle didn't. But they did beat Rick Smith.
Kevin Duckworth.
So they did beat Size twice. Kevin Duckworth, and they did beat Patrick Ewing. So they didn't do it in the finals, but they did it. So they didn't. People get carried with the finals. The Eastern Conference Finals back then weren't the finals.
Sure.
And so they had to do it multiple times with Biggs, and they did it with Brad Daugherty. So you know what? I'm taking that back. The Bulls did it. They just didn't do it in the finals. But I said that to Michael once, and I got that sideways look. Right? And he loved Olajuwon. Loved Olajuwon. Loved him. And had nothing but the utmost respect for him. That wasn't an era of guys dissing each other. Like, as much as Jordan and Isaiah may have hated each other in real time, if you ask Michael Jordan today, name his 5 greatest point guards of all time, I know who's going second after Magic Johnson. I know who's going second. Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah.
So even though guys may have hated each other then, and they fought each other literally in ways that today's players cannot fight each other, they had this unbelievable level of respect. And you know what? I say that. I think he does say Isaiah above Stockton, but Jordan loved Isaiah and Stockton. He loved both of them.
I'd take Magic would clearly be my number one.
Magic was played, and Isaiah won twice. I mean, he won twice.
Yeah, I would have Isaiah in front of Stockton.
I would. Me too.
Yeah.
I have Isaiah, and I understand Steph Curry changes the conversation because he's an alien. It's a different conversation, and what he does is different. But in terms of the way we thought about point guard for 75 years in the league.
Sure.
So, but it's interesting to think about Olajuwon and that team and how they might have played, especially with Drexler on the second team, how they would have played, the Bulls and others in that era. It was
Drexler wasn't on the second team, was he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, Drexler was on the second team. Drexler has a ring. Yeah.
No. He was on the first winner in 94.
No, the second one. He wasn't on the first one. He was on the second Rockets winner.
Okay,
yeah,
against Orlando.
Yeah, he got traded to them late. Yes, against who was the second one? The second one was I get those finalists.
Well, no, they beat the Knicks in 7, and then they beat Orlando with Shaq.
It swept Orlando, right?
Yeah, they swept.
They sweep Orlando.
Yeah.
So Clyde was on the second.
That was Mike Wilbon on my podcast yesterday. There was a lot more, including some of his thoughts on the NBA draft, if you want to listen to it. But how about 2 things he said? Canada's going to win the gold medal in 28 in LA. And he said that a certain 7-footer with ties to Washington basketball at the Knicks Pacers or during the Knicks Pacers series told him that the refs, that there was a conscientious effort in this postseason to have the referees let teams play, let them be physical defensively. Don't call a lot of what we saw. And there was no doubt that was the case during the postseason. All right, let's talk some football. Dietrich Wise said something about his new team, and there's a suggested trade, 2 of them involving Washington, that we'll talk about next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live if you want to download the Odyssey app, but you can watch us on our Team 980 YouTube page. Like us and subscribe to us when you get there. So Washington added a bunch of defensive players in the offseason. We're not sure how they'll work out, and no matter what anybody says or whatever you read, we won't know really until the games begin if Javon Kinlaw is going to be a major impact player. Dietrich Wise, Eddie Goldman, we know they got bigger up front. What does Jonathan Jones and Will Harris look like as new players? What do rookies Trey Amos and the kid from UCLA, Kane Medrano, look like? What does Deron Payne look like in what, for all intents and purposes, while it isn't technically, but witnessing what happened to Jonathan Allen, this is kind of a contract year. This is kind of a prove-it year for Deron Payne. They got to get better defensively. We all know that. Dietrich Wise comes to Washington with, a background that includes having played for the New England Patriots for some 8 seasons from 2017 through 2024, being a big part of Bill Belichick's New England Patriots. His best season ever was 7.5 sacks in 2022. Had 5 last year for the Patriots in the one season under head coach Gerard Mayo. They're obviously going with a new coach after one season. The Patriots will be this year, going to a familiar face. But Dietrich Wise comes in here as a veteran player, a 6'5", 285-pound defensive end that can do a little bit of everything. He was interviewed over the weekend by clutchpoints.com, and he had an interesting couple of quotes. He said that this was on Clutch Points. Now I'm looking. Was he on with John Keim? Maybe it was from Keim. John, if it was with you, I apologize. It looked like, based on the headline, it came from Clutch Points. Yeah, this was from John Keim's podcast. Even better. Okay, so I'm glad I figured that out. From John Keim's podcast, Dietrich Wise was asked by John what he learned playing under Belichick for all of those years. And he explained, about wisdom that he received. And he said, quote, "So the wisdom that I have accumulated over those years, it has been those things that I keep saying. But also one of the things Bill always said was practice execution becomes game reality. That's the one thing I've always taken to heart. Practice as hard as I can and exactly how I want the game to be. That's what makes great teams great." And I feel like that's the first 2 things I heard being talked about when I got to the Commanders. Coach Witt, defensive coordinator, and also Coach DQ, Dan Quinn, they both said, quote, "We have to be able to practice the same way we want to have happen in the game." So I was saying the same thing. So they're echoing success every single day that we're in the building, closed quote. So he likes the culture. He likes what is being discussed about how they're going to practice. Maybe he ends up being a real surprise contributor. I don't think it would be a surprise at this point. At 30 years old, we know what we're getting. But, him on one side, Armstrong on the other, Kinlaw moving around, Payne, with Johnny Newton involved, Eddie Goldman involved in the rotation. Maybe you end up having, somebody like a John Baptiste or Cleveland Farrell be a part of the pass rushing, but obviously Frankie Louvu will be featured. God, they need to be better up front. They need to be better defensively, and Dietrich Wise might be part of that. So there was something else that I wanted to bring up. David Hellman, Fox Sports NFL reporter, did, one of those mid to late June columns about, hey, man, there's still some trades. There's still some unhappy veterans out there that could get moved. Jalen Ramsey, Trey Hendrickson, Terry McLaurin, TJ Watt, and he came up with various trades. Now, if you've been reading about Terry now, somebody has suggested Terry get traded to the Patriots, the Jets, the Steelers, the Raiders, and the Chargers. I've seen at least 5, again, hey, what do you think about this possible trade? Not reporting, just this time of year. Lots of different landing spots for Terry. I think Terry's landing spot will be where he played last year and the year before that and the year before that. Here, under a new contract by the time we get to training camp. There was also some report from somebody I'm unfamiliar with, Lake Lewis, who, has a podcast talking about the team. He reported that Terry's looking for between $36 and $37 million a year. I think, Max, that was it, right?
That was the number. The veracity of the report is
unconfirmed. I'm unfamiliar, but hey, if there's no doubt that the logical answer as to why there is, not a deal yet is he's asking for too much, and they don't think he's worth that. I think they'll figure it out. I do. But this David Hellman from Fox had a trade of Terry out of Washington and a trade of another player into Washington. I'll mention where he's got Terry going. So he's got Terry going to the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, let me just, read what he writes. To be clear, he writes, I'm incredibly confident Terry McLaurin will remain a Washington Commander. He's been loyal to that franchise even when times weren't so good. He's done nothing but produce even when he didn't have a star quarterback. He's even held out before as he used this strategy to secure his current contract extension back in 2022. I really don't think Washington will let him walk when it finally has a chance to contend. Again, Washington's not going to let him walk. He's under contract for 2025. If he ended up playing for somebody else, it would be because they traded him. They're not going to let him walk and become a free agent with 1 year left on his deal. Again, to me, best case is they work out a deal. It's also the most likely case in time for him to participate in training camp and be ready for the regular season. Worst case, I think, is that Terry plays 2025 under his existing contract that has 1 year left on it. And at the end of 2025, they figure something out, either franchise tagging him or perhaps letting him go to free agency. I don't think that'll happen. I think they will get him signed to a long-term deal. But Washington trades Terry McLaurin to the Las Vegas Raiders in this, hypothetical column written by David Hellman at Fox Sports. He also says, if I'm dreaming up the perfect landing spot for McLaurin, Vegas sounds fun. Talk about a big swing for a team that hasn't had a lot to get excited about. The Raiders already are in decent shape for Geno Smith's first season, with Brock Bowers potentially becoming a star, and Ashton Genty could be one soon. Jacoby Myers is a solid receiver, but Vegas still needs to upgrade its receiver room. Rather than take your chances in the draft, why not ship a pick or two to Washington and lock in McLaurin for the rest of his prime? Make fun of me if you want, but a Raiders skill group of McLaurin, Bowers, Genty, and Myers might be the best in the AFC West. Yeah, when you think about the AFC West skill position, players, I mean, Kansas City's got to be healthy. But anyway, so that's one part of this column. The other is this. Pittsburgh Steelers edge TJ Watt to Washington. And he writes, again, I'm not buying that the Steelers would do this. Watt is an iconic piece of that franchise, and that word carries weight in Pittsburgh. Furthermore, even with Aaron Rodgers a quarterback, the Steelers' hopes of accomplishing anything this season will still rest on their defense. But why not indulge one delusional fantasy with another? If Washington were to trade Terry McLaurin, they'd be opening some financial wiggle room to add another lucrative player. They could get at least 2, if not 3 years of play out of Watt before they have to worry about extending Jaden Daniels. They definitely need the pass rush help. Watt would give Dan Quinn a blue chip player, which he doesn't really have right now on his Commanders defense. Adding him to a pass rush that currently includes Frankie Louvu, Dorrance Armstrong, Dietrich Wise, and Cleveland Farrell would upgrade the Washington pass rush from so-so to outright dangerous. Sure, maybe it's a mixed message to hinder the offense by trading McLaurin only to add TJ Watt, but with all due respect to Scary Terry, I think it's a bit harder to find a defensive player of the year level edge rusher than an all-pro caliber receiver in today's NFL. David Hellman, this is what he writes on Fox Sports. So I was thinking about this. Neither one of these two things will happen. But would you swap Terry McLaurin for TJ Watt? First of all, that's not exactly how it would work. You know, Washington would get less back from the Raiders for trading Terry McLaurin than they'd have to give up for TJ Watt. TJ Watt would cost more. You know, both are looking to get paid. TJ Watt would cost more in compensation, player compensation, draft compensation, etc. You know, a lot more actually than Terry McLaurin. But I'm just curious because I have a feeling some of you are going to be like, no, what do you have at receiver if you don't have Terry? It'd be devastating to Jaden's second year. No, I would not want Washington to trade for J.J. Watt after dealing Terry McLaurin to another team. I'll give you my answer as to what I would want. And I want yours at 301-230-0980. Even though it wouldn't be a straight swap TJ Watt for Terry McLaurin. And that's not the way to view it because that's unrealistic. You really have to think about, you know, Terry McLaurin and like you're giving up probably the net of a second round pick minimum. And you get TJ Watt back, something like that. All right. You know, even if they were going to different teams, you know, Terry going to not Pittsburgh, would you do it? Would you want TJ Watt on this team if it meant not having Terry McLaurin on this team? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I'll give you my answer. Max will give you his, and I want yours. Phone lines are open.
All right. Well, now that we're through the NBA Finals, some trade news is hot off the presses. This Boston Celtics are sending Drew Holiday back to the Portland Trailblazers in exchange for Anthony Simons and 2 second-round picks. MRIs confirmed yesterday on Tyrese Halliburton that the Pacers guard has torn his right Achilles and will likely miss the majority of the 2026 season. In a statement he released to social media last night, he said, quote, "I do it again," end quote. Cal Raleigh continues to extend his lead in the AL home run race after he launched his 32nd dinger of the season. His 6th home run in the last 6 games. Aaron Judge trails with 28. Excited to see them in the home run derby coming up in a few weeks. The Nats, they get their bats active last night to hoist themselves over the Padres. Mitchell Parker gets the win, and James Wood hits a 3-run bomb. The Nats win 10-6. They continue their series against the Padres tonight. First pitch is at 9:40. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 9:10. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
From Edward, throw in the Browns to the Terry trade rumor list. Yeah, I don't even know if they're like rumors. It's just what you see because Terry right now is looking for a new contract, and there's been a lot written about, perhaps the two sides being apart, if not far apart. You see people, coming up with, hey, I got an idea for a trade. And yeah, I mean, if you opened up every single one of these stories with the headline, Washington, could trade Terry McLaurin to the Jets, the headlines are sucking you into something that isn't a report. It's just, hey, what do you think about this deal? Just like we do. Yeah, I've seen Patriots. I've seen Chargers. I've seen Jets. I've seen Steelers. I've seen, did I say Pats? And now Edward says the Browns too. So what we're talking about here is that Fox Sports's, the gentleman's name is David Hellman, wrote a story yesterday with some of the veteran guys that are looking for contracts. Look, we do know that Miami's Jalen Ramsey is legitimately on the trade market. They haven't moved him yet. Interesting. Trey Hendrickson's name has been obviously in the news going back to before the draft. He threw in Jonnu Smith, the tight end in Miami, Terry McLaurin, TJ Watt. These were the names, and he finishes with a bang. Terry McLaurin gets dealt to the Raiders, and TJ Watt gets dealt to Washington. But he says he doesn't think any of these things will happen, nor do I. But that's not going to stop us from these hypothetical conversations. So you would certainly have to give up more for J.J. Watt than you would for Terry McLaurin. So if Washington actually traded Terry McLaurin away to the Raiders and got back, say, I don't know, a second-round pick, something like that for Terry, it's not going to be a first-round pick. You're not getting a first-round pick back for Terry McLaurin entering his age 30 season. Could you get a second-rounder back? Sure, I think so. I mean, these are the conversations we have all the time that we're way off on. TJ Watt is a package, man. That's, a first and a second. That's, even though you got to pay him. I mean, he is, one of the best players of his generation. He is, a 7-time Pro Bowler, a 4-time first-team All-Pro player, a 5-time All-Pro player in general, a Defensive Player of the Year back in 2021, twice the runner-up to Myles Garrett, I'm assuming, as the Defensive Player of the Year. And then he would also finish 3rd and 4th in another year, including last year in the Defensive Player of the Year. He's a dominant player. He's got 108 sacks in his 8 seasons in the NFL, 22 and a half back in 2021, got hurt in 2022. Last 2 years, 19 sacks and 11 and a half sacks last year. He's looking for a new deal. Like Terry, he's got a year left, but he wants to get paid now, and I think the Steelers will do it. But here's what I'm looking for. I'm trying to gauge the reaction because many of you have just, you're just built for, no, we don't need to trade for anybody. We don't need to trade up. We don't need to pick a quarterback at number 2. We could trade back and accumulate more picks. Trey Hendrickson, we shouldn't be giving up future picks for a guy like that. So if we just said J.J. Watt and just say the difference would be like, you got to give up a legitimate pick along with J.J. Watt. We'll just say, 2 future seconds for J.J. Watt. Forget whether or not we have them or not. Just, you're going to have to give up a little bit more for Terry McLaurin. It's not what this guy suggested. He trades Terry to the Raiders and then brings J.J. Watt to Washington. But really what I'm looking for is, would you want J.J. Watt on the team if it meant not having Terry on the team? 301-230-0980. This one's easy. I mean, it's really easy. Yes, of course. You're going to give me one of the top 2 or 3 defensive players in the league for a guy who is really good. And by the way, a great culture, locker room, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, it would leave Washington in a current, bind at wide receiver. You'd be going with, hoping that Debo can play big time, hoping that Noah Brown's healthy and ready to go, Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane, Michael Gallup, the whole 9 yards. I mean, there would be a bit of, Terry's very important to what they want to be offensively this year. Everybody understands that. You add TJ Watt to this defense, and I think your chances of getting to the Super Bowl and winning it are better. The option being TJ Watt on the team, Terry McLaurin. I would take TJ Watt every single day of the week and twice on Sundays. This is a no-brainer for me. Give me number 90 off the edge, wreaking havoc, needing to be game planned for, making it easier for everybody else on that defense, giving the offense the ball back much more than it got it back last year, turning teams over and giving the offense short fields. Yeah, his impact would be far greater in the ultimate goal of trying to get to the Super Bowl and win it than Terry's presence. And I value Terry's presence and want it and know we're going to get it more likely than not. But this would be an absolute no-brainer. Max, what do you say?
Yeah, it would pain me greatly to see somebody like Terry McLaurin, who has been around this team and on this team for as many years as he has, get shipped out for a guy, or not directly, but a guy like TJ Watt in this scenario. But with the way that TJ is able to affect the game on defense, the offensive line has to slide another man over or put a tight end on him. So they're already going a man down. It like you said, it feels like a no-brainer, but emotionally it would pain me. But if you have an opportunity to bring a guy like TJ Watt in and put him on this team, I think that's something you have to very much consider. And at the same time, you also have to look at the offense and the wide receiver room and say, all right, how can we supplement Terry McLaurin and his production in this offense with these receivers that we have on hand? And I think that's a lot easier to do on the offensive side of the ball with a guy like Jaden Daniels than it is on the defensive side of the ball with what we currently have in Dietrich Wise, Dorrance Armstrong, Cleveland Ferrell, guys like that.
When TJ Watt came out in the 2017 draft, I was doing the show with Cooley. Cooley was so good at evaluating draft prospects. That particular draft, I'll never forget, after he watched TJ Watt, and he came in one day and he just said, I have no idea why people are projecting TJ Watt any less than like the second or third pick in the draft. He is and I think he said he's the best player in this draft along with Myles Garrett. And then he said also in that draft, I think this was the Christian McCaffrey draft, he said Christian McCaffrey is not only the best running back in this draft, he's the best wide receiver in this draft if they just wanted to line him up and play at wide receiver. And but God, he loved TJ Watt. He thought TJ Watt was going to be his brother and some. How many Defensive Player of the Years did JJ Watt win? More than one, right?
JJ or TJ?
JJ. TJ's won one Defensive Player of the Year. He's finished runner-up twice. JJ Watt had to win it more than once, right?
3 times, I think.
3 times?
That's according to StatMuse, but Wikipedia also says 3 times. So, yeah.
Yeah. And Washington, remember, had a chance in the 2010 draft to take J.J. Watt. They didn't. They traded back. They ended up selecting Ryan Kerrigan, really good player, not J.J. Watt. Sometimes you got to be careful when you trade back that you're not passing up on a generational all-time Hall of Fame kind of player. All right, 301-230-0980. So, take the draft picks, and it would cost more, obviously, to get Watt than we would get back for Terry. But would you be okay if after, as Fox Sports' David Hellman writes, Washington ended up with TJ Watt and the Raiders ended up with Terry McLaurin? Rick in North Carolina, kick it off for us. Go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
TJ Watt would be my pick. I think it would come down to, like you say, numbers, and pay. Would you rather pay T.J. Watt $35 million a year or
Yes.
pay Terry McLaurin $35 million a year?
The former.
I think we can not replace Terry, but I think with our offense and Chris Kingsbury, I think we can. The offense wouldn't really take a big hit, but
yeah, your phone
I
isn't
think
great.
it's gonna
Sorry,
come down.
Rick. Your phone, and maybe we can put him back on hold and get him back. But your phone's really muffled. But I think you said, would you rather pay Watt, sort of in that Myles Garrett range of $40 million a year or something just short of it, or pay Terry, closer to $30 million? I'd rather the former. Yeah, I'd rather have T.J. Watt and pay him the going rate. They're basically both the same age. Let's go to Owen in Dallas. Owen, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Owen.
So, love Terry McLaurin. He's an absolute, star in our organization, on the field, off the field. But looking at the trade, you can't get emotionally attached to players. You learn this as a fan. You just can't get emotionally attached. So I would take T.J. Watt. He's an immediate upgrade in what we need in the trenches. He's going to be an immediate impact player day one. And I do agree with you. He's going to be a better chance of us getting to a Super Bowl than Terry McLaurin. I believe you talked about this earlier in the season. Like, not too many teams are game planning for Terry. Sure, they're putting their best corner on him.
Yeah.
But T.J. Watt's going to be the number one focus for other teams playing against us. So
That's right.
I just think it's a much better upgrade. He's an immediate impact player, and it would suck to lose Terry McLaurin. But just thinking about this as a general manager, it's a no-brainer, like you said.
Yeah, I think it is. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it, Owen. We're talking about just, one of these, columns written, suggested trades with veterans looking for new contracts. And this gentleman at Fox Sports said, well, how about shipping Terry to the Raiders and then using all of that cap space that you're not going to spend on him to go get T.J. Watt? And so I'm just asking, would you be okay if somehow Terry got shipped out and T.J. Watt got shipped in? I think it's absolutely a no-brainer. T.J. Watt's a dominant defensive player, and his impact would increase the chances much more in getting to a Super Bowl and winning a Super Bowl than Terry's presence. And Terry's presence is huge for them, going for another 12 or 13 wins and having a chance to get to the Super Bowl, but not what T.J. Watt's impact would be. Chad in Nashville, go ahead.
What's up, Kevin?
Hey
man,
Chad,
first
what's
off,
happening?
I'm glad your health's doing all right. It's been a minute,
thanks, man.
and
I'm good.
you scared me a couple weeks ago, so
I'm good, man.
I'm glad I get to listen to you. So, man, I changed my mind. I told him Terry, but after hearing you talk, I will say I don't think it's as easy, like laughing, like as easy of a decision. Maybe in as far as player, like you finally get him and he's on the field and stuff like that. But what you lose and what you're gaining, to me, is also a question as well, okay? He is in his 8th year as well. How many years do you think he still has left at prime, just dog chasing the quarterback? How many years would you say?
Edge, defensive ends, pass rushers, they age well, man. They age well. We're watching one in Khalil Mack age very well. So they tend to age much better than receivers. So I would that would be part of the calculus, that, Watt and is, they're basically the same age. Terry's the next draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, 2 drafts later. So Terry's probably a year and a half younger. I'll figure it out. But I think you got 3 years of MVP caliber football from T.J. Watt.
Okay, then if that's the case, yes, I'm doing it. It's going to hurt to get rid of Terry. But what we saw last year, and think about it, you got a quarterback in James Daniels, the 4th best quarterback in the NFL, okay? 5th best if you want to say 5th best. Quarterbacks like that make receivers better, okay? Now, do we have a number one? That concerns me a little bit. But you got a quarterback that can throw anybody open. Can he run a 4.3? Can he catch a football? Okay, just tell him to be looking in Jaden Daniels' direction, okay, because the ball's going to be there. So if that's the case, yes, you can afford to get rid of Terry, but just know that you might take a little bit of a step back with Jaden, don't you think? Possibly with statistics wise. I mean, and you have to be okay.
It always helps if you've got a really
go.
good receiver. It always helps quarterbacks if you've got a top 10-ish kind of wide receiver, no doubt. And they wouldn't have one on the roster without Terry, unless Debo got back to, prime Debo, play. Different,
not a linebacker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Different way of getting the results.
Thanks, Kevin. Good talking to you,
appreciate it, Chad. Let's go to Anthony in DC. Anthony, go ahead.
So everything you say is true, but the only problem with the scenario is TJ Watt gets hurt too much. Take away the injury part of it, it's a no-brainer. But for my taste,
played 17 the last 2 years. Played every single game the last 2 years. He was hurt in 2022. By the way, still made the Pro Bowl, only playing 10 games.
And wasn't he hurt the year before that also?
Played 15 out of the 16 games because that was a 16-game schedule. So he missed a game. And then didn't miss, in his first 4 seasons, he missed 1, 2, 3 football games. In his first 5 seasons, he missed 3 football games. And then in 2022, he missed, I forget what the injury was. I'll look it up. But he missed 7 games.
Okay. Take away the injury part of it is a no-brainer. That's my only worry. But let me ask you a question. So it seems to me that the
torn pec in 2022, just FYI. Go ahead.
Okay. It seems to me that the NFL is stuck on this old mentality of once a player hits 30, it's all downhill from there. And to my way of thinking, it should be
not with quarterbacks.
Exception to the rule, but generally, overall, once a player hits 30, quarterbacks and offensive line, the exception, they look at them as a diminishing product. To my way of thinking, it should be dependent on the player. You should look at the potential of what they can do, because if you think about it, this is an extreme example. Jerry Rice was excellent into his mid-30s.
Yeah.
For us, Henry Ellert was still that dude.
He was a great route runner.
Exactly. So cheaper and younger isn't always better.
No.
So depending on the player, you should be willing to pay them. If you should have confidence in your ability to assess a player and say, yeah, this player still has it.
But it's a sport that once you reach a certain age at most positions, your performance starts to decline. We name the positions: O-line, quarterback, and actually pass rusher. Those tend to be the positions where you get high production in the 30s. We've seen Khalil Mack. We've seen Von Miller, in terms of pass rushers. We've seen, we saw Aaron Donald into his early 30s. He didn't need to retire. We've seen DeMarcus Lawrence be a good player into his 30s, right? I'm sure I'm forgetting others, but I wouldn't feel like TJ Watt was a risk at 30 years old.
No, I'm not talking about TJ Watt. I'm talking about Terry. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If we had Devontae Adams at 32 versus Terry, would you pay Devontae Adams $35 million?
No, but I think Devontae Adams is going to be special this year in LA with Matt Stafford. And I think with a look, he was great without a quarterback in Vegas there for a couple of years. I think Devontae Adams still has a chance to play at a high level. I think he's a rare player that we're going to see play at a high level into his early to mid 30s. But you can't pay him, in the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson range at this age. You're not guaranteed to get 3-4 years out of him.
See, that's the part I'm saying. He's 32.
Yeah.
3-year, $110 million contract. put him at between 33 and 35 million. You wouldn't make that deal?
No, what's his contract's much less than that right now, correct?
No, I'm saying if
no,
that's
I would
what
not.
you
I would
wanted.
not have Devontae Adams at 35 to 40 million a year. Not at this age. No.
No, I said 32 to 35.
Maybe. What is he? He's
That's my
32
whole
now or
point.
33 now?
32, maybe 33.
Yeah. So I just pulled up right now for the Rams. Basically, he signed a 2-year, $44 million deal with the Rams. So they're paying him $22 million a year. So
No,
I guess the answer.
I understand that.
Yeah. The answer would be it's too rich, even though I really like the player.
My whole point is if he is your guy, he's your number one guy, and he wants that kind of money, you wouldn't give it to him. If you believe that he's going to produce for the next 3 years, that's my whole point.
Yeah, if he's my guy, I don't know, man. To me, I actually think Devontae Adams is better than Terry McLaurin right now, and I wouldn't give Terry 32, 33. So
I wouldn't disagree with that.
What'd you say?
I said I wouldn't disagree that he's better than Terry.
Yeah. Okay, but what's your point? Your point is still pay guys that you think are going to be great, even though they're entering their early 30s.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Off of a story in Fox at Fox Sports suggesting a few trades of veterans that are still trying to work out contracts. The writer sent Terry to Vegas and brought TJ Watt to Washington. Understood TJ Watt would be more expensive to bring to Washington than Terry would bring back in a trade. But how would you feel if Terry wasn't on the team and TJ Watt was? 301-230-0980. We've got a phone line open if you want to weigh in. All of you on hold. I'll get to you next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. How would you feel if TJ Watt ended up in Washington, but Terry McLaurin got shipped out somewhere else? That's what Fox Sports' David Hellman wrote. Terry McLaurin to Vegas, TJ Watt to Washington. Neither one of these two things is going to happen. But how would you feel if Washington went into 2025 with Terry McLaurin elsewhere, but TJ Watt on the defensive line? For me, it's an absolute no-brainer. It doesn't matter how I feel about Terry. Doesn't matter, honestly, what they would be lacking at wide receiver. They'd be adding a guy that's not only in his era among the best defensive players, he's been the best defensive playmaker. 33 forced fumbles. He's led the league twice. I mean, how many times have we seen number 90 not only get there, but use that big right arm to swipe down and force a fumble? 33 forced fumbles in his 8-year career. He's led the league twice in forced fumbles. His impact, I think, would give the team a better chance to get to and win a Super Bowl. You'd have to figure out what's going on receiver-wise. You might have to look into some of the free agents that are out there. You know, Gabe Davis is available, and Amari Cooper is available. But if you gave me the either-or, I'd rather have TJ Watt on the team than Terry McLaurin. I'd like to have both of them. I really would have loved to have had Terry and then somebody like Myles Garrett had he really been on the trade block, but he never made it that far. 301-230-0980. Bobby in North Carolina, what do you say?
Hey, brother, what's happening?
Hey, Bobby, what's going on?
Isn't it kind of ironic, though, the last three names out there, Garrett, Henderson, and now Watt, has had articles wrote about or been a little smoke surrounding our team. You know, that tells me we still had to solve that problem at rush in. You know, we both agree the defenses will carry this team. But if you could pull this off, it's a no-brainer, like you said. But we got the, defenses will take us to where we want to go if that's the case this year. Terry's a great player and a great team member. Everybody loves Terry. I love Terry. He made a lot of plays, but, Terry's just around 10 to 14 in the receiver corps, but he's not top 4 or 5, and I just definitely don't want me to give money to him like that, okay, going forward. I mean, they might be forced to, but I don't think they will. But if we could get TJ Watt or rush in to go along with his defense coming back, that would be a no-brainer in my eyes, brother. So,
it is with you. Yeah, it is with me too. I guess, what did we put up? We put up something, a poll.
Yeah, I put up a poll just to get a little read on the public here, because I'm curious myself. And right now, Terry McLaurin, with 82 votes in, Terry McLaurin leads with 73.2% of the vote.
Votes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Okay. That's why I asked. That's why I wanted to take calls, because it wasn't going to surprise me if many decided, no, I'll let TJ Watt stay where he is. We'll keep Terry. Let's go to 757 Paulie. What's up? Hail to the W.
Hail to the W. How you doing, big guy? What's going on?
Up? Not much. I'm good.
Hey, man. Hey, I'm sticking with Terry, man. Hey, to me, who you said did this report? Dan Snyder. We playing Madden. Dan and Vinny. They gonna give up 2 number 1s for Chad.
Dan and Vinny wouldn't be. Well, Dan wouldn't even think about this. I mean, he would have had Terry signed to a Jamar Chase kind of deal. I mean, back in like 2008.
And he also would have traded the next 5 number 1 draft picks for TJ Watt.
Well, yeah. I mean, he offered 2 for Chad Ochocinco, 2 first rounders. So you would you'd keep Terry and not bring in TJ Watt.
We made it to the NFC Championship game with Dante Fowler as our leading sacker.
And what happened in that NFC Championship game?
Yeah, okay. So you're saying TJ Watt was just going to change the whole outcome of that game? I mean, the Steelers haven't made it too far with him. And I know the quarterback situation is different. I know that, but
Maybe he would have made a
Terry's
difference in a
tangible.
couple of regular season games, which would have put Washington in a different, position in that game.
Hey, listen, bro. You asking
Yeah.
an awful lot for a team who won 12 games.
I understand that, but that's not the goal. I want to win the Super Bowl.
I want to win the Super Bowl, too.
And they sucked on
But you don't
defense last year.
Yeah, but you don't have to have the number one player in the league on defense, and you definitely going to have to break the bank for him. You know what I mean? So you're breaking the bank for a guy that hasn't played it down for you. I'm going to keep what I got. And I heard you say that you think Devontae Adams is better than Terry. I don't think that, man. I mean, he might be more, if you want to say more explosive or more fluid than Terry, but I wouldn't say he's a better all-around receiver than Terry, man. I mean, Terry, if Devontae Adams was on this, Devontae was on this team last year, and he started out the first two games like Terry did, all hell would have broke loose, because we've seen it happen with the Raiders. People get talent and all-around professionalism mixed up a lot. It's not that big. It's not that big of a step difference between Terry.
Devontae Adams has always been a pro.
He always been a pro. He forced his way out of the Raiders, off the Raiders team, because he wasn't getting the ball enough, and he ended up with over 100 catches.
Okay, he's also 32 years old, and let me just ask you this serious question: do you think Devontae Adams in his prime years, let's just go back to some of those years in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, is better than Terry's ever been here?
Now that I'll give you that. I'll give you in his prime.
It's not even close.
No, it's not, because I was a
dude was catching 115, 120 balls a year.
But you know what? When he got out of that situation, he showed his true colors, man.
He caught 100 in Vegas. He caught 103 with Aiden O'Connell as a quarterback.
And he bitched the whole time.
Okay.
About it.
Well,
Have you heard Terry?
Fine. You know what?
Complain?
You know what? I'll take 103 catches with what they had in Vegas that year with a little bit of bitching. Devontae Adams has never been a major problem anywhere.
It was a major problem with the Raiders.
A major problem in an organization that was going nowhere. Going nowhere. I think him and Nakua this year, if Stafford stays healthy, that's going to be dangerous. That team has a lot going for it this year. If Stafford stays healthy, big if at 36, 37 years old.
You get me mixed up. I didn't say Devontae was trash. I just said that back when he was in Green Bay, he was my favorite player. I had him ranked as 1 or 2 as far as
he was definitely 1 or 2. That's my point. The comparison to what Terry's been versus what Devontae has been, it's not even close. I think Devontae Adams has a lot left, and I think we saw that in New York last year in that second half of the season. I mean, in 11 games, he almost caught as many balls as Terry did for the season. He had 67 catches in 11 games. Terry had 82 in 17.
Yeah, okay. Right.
Yeah.
Terry has a lot left. Terry got a lot.
I agree. I love Terry.
Terry is the leader. Terry is the leader of this team, man. Devontae Adams is not leading nobody's team except to the end zone.
We're not, but that's not the question. We're not talking about Devontae Adams. We're talking about T.J. Watt.
You brought it up.
How's T.J. Watt as a leader? You brought up Devontae Adams.
No, you was talking about him a couple callers ago, man.
I know that because the caller mentioned Devontae Adams, and I said I think Devontae Adams. I'd probably take him right now. But that's not the question, man. Sometimes you just cannot be coached. So you would take Terry instead of T.J. Watt on this upcoming team seat.
Just off of what I said, man. We got to the championship game with Dante Fowler as our leading sack guy. We can find somebody to get some sacks, man. Now I understand, Watt is a great player. He is. And I'm not trying to give up my best receiver a draft pick and got to pay him the highest defensive
I don't think you got to match Garrett. Money. I think you can come in a little bit lower than Garrett because Garrett's younger.
No, I think that's the problem now. I think he wants to be matched like that.
I understand that. Let's see what it ends up being.
And let Micah Parsons get signed first. And that's really what the problem is with both the teams. Is Parsons and T.J. Watt trying to see who's going to get the money first. That's what's going on. But yeah, man.
Well, when you bring that up, when you bring that up, it just makes you wonder, what is Jerry Jones thinking? Why would he let Myles Garrett and potentially TJ Watt go out and get paid instead of doing the Parsons deal early? He has gotten burned on all of these transactions. Dak, CD, and he's going to get burned on the Parsons deal too. He's going to pay Parsons, no doubt.
You know what it is? You know what it is with Jerry? Jerry doesn't look at it as he's getting burned. He's looking at it as, it's a measuring stick thing with him. You know what I'm talking about. He want to show he got the biggest thing.
But it's so stupid. You don't want to be the biggest in that area.
But Jerry do.
Yeah.
Jerry does, man. Right. I'm telling you, man. That's all it is. It's a show for him. He want to prove that, hey, the Cowboys is what everybody's talking about. He has to be the talk of the town. He's that girl that has to have the center of attention at all times. So that's all
terrible it's terrible what they've done in managing their salary structure and cap. They have they have not managed it well at all.
It's beautiful. Let them keep doing it. Let them
keep
ripping the team apart.
I agree. All right, let me roll. Let me go. Marcus and Brandywine, go ahead.
Kevin, I respect you, man. You're a Max, because I would accidentally hit the end button so fast on some of these callers. It's amazing.
Well, Paulie's my guy. Paulie's honestly one of my favorite and one of the sharpest callers I have. Even though he's wrong on this one.
Funny, man. Paulie's funny, but it's some crazy guy. Listen, first, 2 points. First thing is, people are so emotionally invested in Terry McLaurin. I mean, rightfully so to a point. Like, he stuck it out. And you want him to be here, but I don't want 5 12-win seasons. I want a Super Bowl. So if just like what Paulie was saying, he made a great point, but he bit his own tongue with how I was trying to explain it. We made it to the championship with Dante Fowler as our leading sack guy. Jalen Hurts didn't throw for 400 yards in that championship game. No. Saquon Barkley destroyed us up front. So, you have...
He destroyed us in every way possible. We couldn't... They couldn't get off the field against him.
So it's like, you realize, and you have to have some type of knowledge of football to understand that bringing in a guy... Nobody's double-teaming Dante Fowler, but people are going to double-team TJ Watt, and that allows better opportunities to stop the run. We got destroyed in the championship game by the run. Adding TJ Watt, that could have been a game changer. So, absolutely, I would take TJ Watt over, Terry McLaurin for next year. Terry's a great guy, but look what JD did with Olamide Zaccheaus. Look what JD did for De'Ami Brown. Like, he went out and got those guys paid. So there's you can't be so emotionally invested in a player and take that over a Super. I want a Super Bowl.
Yeah, we're talking about one of the best players in the league. Like, he would rank in the top 8 to 10 players in the league. All right, versus a guy who's really good and somewhere in the 10 range at wide receiver. We're talking about a guy that's impacting games. And Terry did too. Yeah. But TJ Watt is, unless you feel like he's about to fall off a cliff at 30, 31 years old, and maybe medical or something like that would speak to that. If you don't think that, he is on the verge of falling off and he's still got another 3 years as TJ Watt, he gives you a chance, a much better chance to win the whole thing than Terry does at wide receiver.
And to that point, to your point about the age thing, him falling off, that however many callers ago it was about this age thing, like my opinion, I'm gonna try to make this short. My opinion is when teams are going out and they're evaluating these trade deals or these free agent signings, I think it's solely based off of what you have in-house, what you are looking to do immediately, and maybe looking to do long term. And we'll go as recent as this DK Metcalf signing. Like, there are probably 25 teams. Not probably. I'd be willing to bet the next year's rent. There are 25 teams that would have looked at that number and laughed. But those other 7 teams,
I'll be honest with you. I've heard so many people criticize the DK Metcalf deal. DK Metcalf, to me, is one of those players capable of dominating a game at that position. In the same way A.J. Brown can, with size and physicality and hands. And, we'll see what it looks like with Aaron Rodgers this year. But Metcalf I've seen so many people drill Pittsburgh for that deal. And I don't know. Metcalf, to me, big, strong, and can dominate games, and we've seen him do it. Hey, I got to roll. Thanks, Marcus. Let's get to a Steelers guy and one of my favorite people, Walt Whitman's Big Tony. What's up?
What's going on, Shawty?
What's up,
Hey, look here, man.
What?
On this Metcalf thing real quick, they weren't going to sign Pickens, all right? So that's why they had to get a receiver. They were going to let Pickens walk, so they needed to get it, all right? Now, here's the thing, Kevin. Watt should have won the Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago when they gave it to Garrett. His numbers crushed Garrett's numbers, all right? That's first of all. Second of all, not only does he pass rush, and like you said, force fumbles, the brother intercepts balls, man. I've seen so many games where he one-hand snags at the line. I'm not talking about a linebacker with a deflection or a cornerback with a deflection or jumping around. I'm talking he's standing at the line. He sees the ball. He jumps and grabs it with his daggone hands. Not only that, Kevin, he's a run stopper. You can't stop the run. He can stop the run. He'll dog it down from the backside. If you try and run right at him, he'll smash your tight end, smash your tackle, and get the ball carry. Dude, it's a no-brainer. People, get off loving your players. I watched the Steelers get rid of Rod Woodson, Troy Polamalu, Greg. I could do this all day long. I watched them let them go when these people could still play. Get off your emotions. And another thing, you keep saying not you. Yeah, was one game away from the Super Bowl. That's cool because Detroit decided to get crazy when my man was getting 25 yards a carry and didn't want to give Gibbs the ball. Didn't want to give.
It wasn't 25, but it was 10 yards a carry. Jameer Gibbs was getting.
They didn't want to give Gibbs the ball, right? And then about 4 or 5 games last year, if the Giants had a kicker, if the dude wasn't doing the twerk jerk in the Chicago game and stop the ball, at the helmet. There's woulda, coulda, shouldas all over the place. Now, like you said, y'all playing a whole different bunch of offenses this year. This ain't that cruddy stuff you played last year. But anyway, that's besides the point. You ain't getting TJ,
but five is still the real deal, and they're gonna be a good team because of them. You know that, right?
The other thing. Dude, no doubt. He's my fourth. He's fourth or fifth for me. But here's the other thing. Kingsbury schemes it up, Jack. I don't care who you got. He will scheme it up. And you got to remember, you got to account for number 5 because he may break out like Lamar. And now what you going to do? Now you start, hey, Kevin, he starts to roll out the corner or whoever the linebacker start to come up like he ain't running. He's throwing it. Now you got Jimmy Joe, who we ain't never heard of, catching the daggone bomb going down the side. Man, Kevin, get these boys straight, man. It's a no-brainer, baby.
I still don't understand what Detroit was thinking. The thing that killed them more than anything is that David Montgomery came back from injury, and they wanted to give him carries, and it was the biggest mistake because Gibbs was running at 10 yards a pop. Yeah, they got us. This is the whole thing next year. They can't, and they're going to be facing Gibbs again, Bijan Robinson again, Saquon Barkley twice. Who else?
West, don't you?
Huh?
You got the AFC? You got the AFC West?
Yeah, we got the AFC West. So we've also got the rookie in Vegas in week 3, Josh Jacobs in week 2. I think one of the surprise rookie players last year was Tyrone Tracy. Like, I could see him becoming a big-time upper echelon back in New York. So they just can't ask Jaden Daniels next year to every week overcome, 6.5 yards per carry by the other team. Can't do that this year because like you mentioned, baby. And I've talked about it a lot, you're not just going to get beat with running backs. You're going to get beat with much better quarterbacks. At least that's the way it lays out now. Things change. Understand.
And you got to remember, Kevin, it was like 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. Y'all ain't even punt. So you can't rely on that again.
I know. And some of those games were still close games. The Giant game in week 2, they didn't punt. And Neighbors dropped a 4th down pass. as did Devontae Smith in the Philadelphia game, which, gave Washington a chance, the football. And, you could argue the 2-point conversion for New Orleans was an opportunity to catch a ball. Look, just because you got breaks, there's nothing that says you're not going to continue to get the breaks. Sometimes they made those breaks. Bottom line is they're going to have a quarterback that if you got the ball down, 6, 7 or less with 2 minutes to go, you're going to have a really good chance to win the game. But TJ Watt, good God. I mean, sometimes I really think some of our fans only watch our games, and that's it.
They do. They ain't got the red zone, man. You take it easy, baby.
All right. Well, it's not just the red zone. All right. If you want to weigh in, we might have another caller or two on this, but we'll wrap it up next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right. Well, now that we're through with the NBA Finals, NBA trade news is hot off the press as the Celtics are sending Drew Holiday back to the Portland Trailblazers in exchange for Anthony Simons and 2 second-round picks. Aaron Rodgers has just confirmed on the Pat McAfee Show that this will likely be his last go around the NFL. Quote, "I am pretty sure this is it. That's why we did a 1-year deal." End quote. Cal Raleigh continues to extend his lead in the AL home run race after he launched his 32nd dinger of the season. That is his 6th home run in the last 6 games. And Aaron Judge trails with 28. The Nats bats got hot last night to hoist themselves over the Padres. Mitchell Parker gets the win, and James Wood hits the 3-1 bomb to crack it wide open. The Nats win 10-6. They will continue their series tonight versus the Padres. First pitch at 9:40, and Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 9:10. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
So the Game 7 on Sunday night between Oklahoma City and Indiana was the most watched NBA Finals game in 6 years. The average audience was 16.53 million on ABC. The audience peaked at 19.28 million during the second half, but 16.53 million is the most in the finals since Game 6 of the 2019 finals, which was Toronto winning the title on that night against Golden State, $18.34 million. The last Game 7 we had in the NBA Finals, when Cleveland completed the 3-1 comeback and beat Golden State in Game 7, that Finals Game 7 averaged 31 million viewers. So this one almost basically, a little bit more than half the viewers in Game 7. That is a big difference between 2016 and 2025. Of course, you're talking about LeBron against Steph, in that Game 7. Massive difference. But, when you compare, man, the NBA where it is now, not that they should even care. They signed a TV deal worth $76 billion last year. They are in great shape for the next 10 to 12 years. And so ratings probably don't matter at all. But, man, it is still a sport. Like the NCAA final, I looked this up, between Houston and Florida, did 18.1 million on that Monday night in March. Basically, almost 1.5 million more than the NBA Finals Game 7. And that's really the comp, right? A Game 7, a one and done versus, the championship game. And God, the Super Bowl this year, the most watched Super Bowl of all time, 127.7 million viewers for Philly and KC in a blowout game. I mean, 1 million more people watched the Super Bowl than a Game 7 NBA Finals. That tells you, man, there's just the NFL rules. And even college basketball's Final Four, even now, because I think college basketball is so much less popular than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. But even a final, championship game, Houston, Florida, that's not even like having Duke. There's no Duke in that championship matchup. There's no North Carolina. There's no Kansas. There's no Kentucky. That did, almost 2 million more viewers than the NBA Finals in Game 7. But, it was, a big audience compared to some of their recent audiences. But, man, you've got to have, in the NBA Finals in Game 7, you got to have known stars. And nobody really knows. Casual sports fans did not know SGA, did not know Jalen Williams, did not know, Halliburton or Siakam. Maybe they'll learn more about these players in future years. All right, we are done for the day. Thanks to Bobby Marks. He was excellent in talking NBA draft. Thanks to all of you who called in on the show. Is it Chris next or Linnell next?
Today is Chris.
All right, it's Chris. I thought you had mentioned something about Linnell.
Linnell did yesterday, and I think that went off without a hitch. So okay. I believe Russell is in the building today.
Chris Russell's next. Back tomorrow, everybody.